great pleasure in extending a warm welcome to my respectful seniors, friends, and colleagues on behalf of Madras Presidency Lawyers Forum. Madras Presidency Lawyers Forum is an initiative of like-minded seniors like our Ravi Meenakshi Singh sir, Manikandan sir, Sheikh Prakash sir, and team. And it is indeed a platform for us to share our knowledge and views on particular subjects for mutual growth and development. And we have been conducting various webinars through this Madras Presidency Lawyers Forum. And we have been talking on various subjects. And today the subject on which we are going to discuss is on MACT law, MACT practice and insurance law. And the speaker for the day is Mr. Mahesh. And of course, we have a special person to give an introduction about Mr. Mahesh, who knows better than all of us about Mr. Mahesh. And she is none other than Mrs. Girija Mahesh. With this, I now request Madam Girija Mahesh to give an introduction about the speaker today. Girija ma'am, now we can go the floor.
Thank you, Vignesh sir. Thank you so very much. A very good afternoon to one and all. It's my pleasure to introduce the guest speaker of the day, Mr. P. Mahesh. He completed his law degree from the School of Excellence in Law in Chennai in the year 2010 and was an associate in the office of Ms. S. Parthasarathi and I. David Singh sir. Mr. Mahesh is a panel advocate for most of the insurance companies, banks, private companies and hospitals. He gained sufficient knowledge in the insurance sector and practices before MACTS at Chennai and also deals with appeals before High Court. He also deals with electricity cases before High Court and other writ matters. He is an avid reader and is also fluent in 7 languages, including 2 foreign languages. He loves to travel and he made his mark when in the year 2014, he embarked on and successfully completed a solo motorcyclist trip to the Himalayas from Chennai to Kathmandu and back, traveling around 5,200 kilometers all alone over 13 days, I'm sorry. And there's much more apart from his professional skills. There's a lot of things to say, but since the time is so limited for me, I would invite Mahesh sir. The floor is all yours.
Good afternoon, one and all. I hope I'm audible to each and everyone. And thank you, Madras Presidency Law Forum, for this opportunity for interacting with you in this webinar. And throughout this series of webinars, many interesting people have given lectures on various topics. And now it is my turn today. I hope I am, if not to their extent, at least I am good to some extent. Now, if somebody says that he knows law in and out, everything about even one particular topic of law, he's either God or is lying. And I believe that the latter is more probable. So with my limited knowledge, let me commence this session on insurance law and MACT practice. Now, giving a brief introduction about insurance as to what insurance is. So it is a simple contract wherein one party, an insurer, he undertakes to make good a loss to a person who is called the insured. That is, if the insured sustains a loss as specified in the contract, it is the duty of the insurer to make good the loss, at least by way of a monetary compensation or replacement. Now, there are broadly defined 2 sectors of insurance. One is life insurance and the other is non-life insurance. Now, as you all know, life insurance is where an insurer undertakes to pay a specific sum of money called the sum insured in the event of a death of a person to the beneficiaries. It could be their family members or it could be anybody else nominated by them. Any insurance apart from a life insurance is a non-life insurance. And in India, there are these 2 basic categories of insurances, life and non-life. Life insurance is just very basic. So as we all know, there is nothing to go deep into that. And since my area of practice is more into non-life insurance, I would be concentrating more on that. Now, in life insurance, there is one public sector company in India, as we all know, LIC, Life Insurance Corporation of India, and there are 23 companies in the private sector. Now, as far as general insurance is concerned, there are 4 public sector companies, and there are 30 companies in the private sector. The 4 public sector companies are United India, National Insurance, New India, and Oriental Insurance Company. And there are other 30 private sector insurance companies. Now, these insurance companies deal with matters starting right from motor insurance, health insurance, fire insurance, marine insurance, and there's also a separate company called the Agriculture Insurance Corporation of India, which caters to around 2 crore farmers in India. It insures their crops in case the crops are damaged by inclement weather or by any other means. If the yield is low, this Agriculture Insurance Corporation of India guarantees that there will be some payout in the form of insurance money. And this corporation is the largest agricultural insurance corporation in the entire world, the Agriculture Corporation of India. Right, now let's see how litigation may arise in insurance law, or when a dispute may arise. There are only 2 conditions where a dispute may arise. See, there's a basic contract where an insurer is undertaken that, suppose if you meet certain contingency, I would pay you some amount of money. Now, when a dispute will arise is when the claim is repudiated, that is, the claim is denied or is not fully satisfied. For example, the insured would say that my claim is for 20 lakhs, you are paying me only 10 lakhs. So in that case, a litigation or a dispute would arise. Now let us see some kinds of with a real few cases where disputes have arisen as to what the nature of the disputes could be. Okay. Now, first of all, a contract of insurance is called a goodwill contract. The insurer, who is the insurance company, he acts on the basis of the information provided by the customer or the insured. Now, it is the duty of the customer to provide only true material details to the insurance company. For example, if it's a contract of a health insurance, the customer is having the obligation to reveal each and every aspect related to his health to the insurer. Now, as all know, in general practice, if we book health insurance through some agents, they will bring up a proposal form and they'll say, no, these are just formalities, no need to fill up all that, I just need your signature. And he obtains your signature of the customer and then fills up the details himself. And then later, at the time when a claim arises, it is known that this particular person would have suffered from a pre-existing illness. Now, that would not have been disclosed in the insurance policy. It is at that time that a dispute arises, and the insurer is at liberty to repudiate the claim because he has not received full material information in regards to the claim. So, he is unable to fix a premium based on the facts given by the customer. So, please, it is my humble request, and please instruct all your clients also never to sign any proposal form of any insurance company without giving the full particulars or the true particulars. That is very important, because we might think that insurance is not needed at this point of time, or we might think that the premium is low, but at the time when a claim arises, it is at that time the acid test of the insurance company. If the customer has not provided the true details, he would be at risk at the time of payment of the claim. Now, in the motor sector, suppose, for example, the insurance companies may deny claims based on things like if a vehicle is driven without a driving license and an accident occurs, if the vehicle is plying on route, commercial vehicle is plying on a route other than which it is authorized to ply, that is, if it's a violation of the route permit, or if there is a misrepresentation on the part of the customer by not revealing accident details in the previous policy, if there is a fraud claim, etc. So these are the conditions under motor law where an insurer may repudiate a claim. And see, the insurance contract runs into several pages, the terms and conditions. Nobody is able to decipher those terms and conditions at the time of obtaining the policy. So please instruct your clients before getting any policy to get a legal opinion, because they might think that we are just paying a premium of 5,000 or 6,000. We'll see at the time of the claim, but no. Let them get a legal opinion as to what type of policy they require. Because I have seen in my practice that there are several companies who have obtained a sort of calamity insurance. In Chennai, they would obtain earthquake insurance because it is needless. Chennai is not in a seismic zone. And most of the times, the insurance companies sell such products to the customers, which they might not even need it. And they would, insure the breakdown of their machinery. But sometimes the electronic parts would fail and they would not insure the electronic components of such machinery. So please ask your clients and anybody you know, your family members and friends, before obtaining any policy of insurance, be it health policy, be it motor policy, to go to the website of that concerned company and just have a look at the terms and conditions as to what is covered under the contract and what is not covered. This is, most helpful in health insurance policies, because in most health insurance policies, there are certain pre-existing very common illnesses which are not covered. Even tonsillitis or certain cysts, ovarian cysts, etc., is not covered. Maternity is not covered in many policies. And we are so gullible, being common laymen, we go and just pay the premium and obtain the policy. But first, we need to take a look at the terms and conditions of the policy in their website, or it is available in the website of the IRDA also. All insurance companies offering the same products have the same terms and conditions, because the terms and conditions are mandated by the IRDA. The IRDA is the regulator of the insurance sector, the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority, based at Hyderabad. So all companies have the same terms and conditions for the same policy. For example, for a motor policy, terms and conditions are the same. Health policy, specific health policy, terms and conditions are the same. All right. So just my advice is to take a look at the terms and conditions. So now, if a dispute arises in this sector, in insurance law, what is the remedy available to the customer? There are two remedies available to the customer. One is to prefer a petition before the insurance ombudsman. Now, this insurance ombudsman is a beautiful concept created by the IRDA. If a dispute arises, say under a health claim, my health claim is being denied, I need to make a representation before the insurance company to their grievance redressal cell, asking them that, see, my health claim is being repudiated by you, and the reasons provided by you is inadequate. It is not in line with the terms and conditions of the policy, and you are obligated to pay my claim. I need to make such a request to the grievance redressal cell of the concerned insurance company. Now, I could, in that case, my claim could either be honored. In that case, I need not take any further action, or they could keep my grievance pending for more than 30 days, or they could reject my request once again. Now, if they keep my request pending for more than 30 days, or if they reject my request at the grievance redressal level, I have the option to move the insurance ombudsman. Now, the insurance ombudsman is actually a mediator, but he has also been granted certain powers under the IRDA rules. So the insurance ombudsman, say for example at Chennai, is based in Tenampet. It's not a very lengthy procedure like a court. It's a very rather simple procedure. You just go to the insurance ombudsman. They'll give you a pre-filled form. You have to enter the details, your details, the company details, the case details, etc. And then they'll send a letter to the concerned insurer. Now the insurer will appear before the insurance ombudsman. First, they'll try to offer a solution, a mediation. And if the insurance company is agreeable to the mediation, a mediation report is being offered by the ombudsman. If not, then the case is taken up on the merits. And now the point to note here is that in case the insurance ombudsman holds that the insurance company is liable to pay a certain sum to the concerned customer or the insured, this order is binding on the insurer. The insurer company has to satisfy the award. It has no other go. The only option available would be to prefer a writ against the insurance ombudsman, that too in very rare cases. So it is very advantageous for the customers to move the insurance ombudsman because it is binding on an award is binding on the insurer. In case the customer does not get the remedy under before the insurance ombudsman, he can always move the courts or the consumer court. So it is their option. So these two are relating to disputes before the ombudsman. Now let us go into the some principles of the Motor Vehicles Act. This is my main area of practice, and in India, a huge number of road accidents are taking place year after year. Now we can attribute this to many reasons, be it reckless driving or providing driving licenses without strict procedures, drunk driving. So these are many reasons by which accidents occur. And sometimes the fault is on the pedestrians also, like crossing the road without looking at the signal, or without not crossing the road at a zebra crossing. So there are many mistakes which can be attributed. Anyhow, once an accident occurs, any person who sustains either an injury or a death has to be reasonably compensated, because he's deprived of his income in injury cases, and in death cases his family is deprived of the income. So they are put at loss. So this financial loss has to be made good. So now a recent amendment has come in Motor Vehicles Act. We shall discuss that later. But going into the general principles, that amendment has not yet been notified in Tamil Nadu. So still we are following the old act. So in Motor Vehicles Act, there are broadly classified into two parts. One part is used by the transport authorities and the transport sector for the issuance of driving licenses, permits, etc. The other part is for motor accident claims tribunals. So these are the two broad classifications. Now in Motor Vehicles Act, as far as the MACTs, motor accident claims tribunals are concerned, there are just 5 or 6 sections that are in routine usage. Now these are sections 146. Now, what 146 of the Motor Vehicles Act 1988 says that no vehicle shall ply on the road without a valid third party motor insurance. Now, who is a third party? As defined under the law, third party includes the government. But this definition is not useful to us. So we need to go further as to who a third party is. Any person who is not the insured, and any person who does not step into the shoes of the insured, is a third party. This is the broad general definition. So if anybody is getting injured, suppose a car is colliding against a pedestrian, the pedestrian is a third party. But this definition does not include the occupants of a car or the pillion rider in a two-wheeler, as per definition under section 146. Even those employees like paid driver, conductor, cleaner, or anybody else associated with the operation of the motor vehicle is a third party. So broadly defined, it covers everybody who is not an insured. There is an exclusion. It states that in a goods vehicle, as per the permit, or even if no permit is available, only goods are meant to be carried. Now we see that on rural roads and even in roads in Chennai, on a Tata Ace, there will be like 10 or 20 people traveling in the back of the Tata Ace. They would either be standing, and even in lorries, they go for functions. They would be standing on the back of lorries, 50, 100 persons in a single lorry. So that is a goods vehicle. And these persons, these category of persons traveling in the goods area of a goods vehicle are called gratuitous passengers. That is non-fare paying passengers. Like if they would be traveling in a bus, they would be fare paying passengers. Now they are traveling in lorries and goods vehicles, so insurance need not cover the death or injury to such gratuitous passengers. Now it pains me when I see like when my hometown is Madurai and I travel there often, and along the highways, these lorries are laden with so many people, especially in Viluppuram district, Perambalur district. I don't know if it is a lack of awareness or just the driver wanting to make a quick buck. But if something happens, if the vehicle capsizes, there is no remedy available to them. So please instruct everybody that you know, your friends and family, that whenever don't encourage this practice of traveling in a goods vehicle in the goods loading area. Now, the only exception to this is when a person who is the owner of the goods or his authorized representative, he is allowed to travel in a goods vehicle, but in the cabin only. Like for example, I am booking my consignment of goods from Chennai to say Mumbai. I am allowed to travel in the said lorry, but I should be sitting in the cabin area and not in the goods area. So this owner of the goods is already covered under third party insurance. Now, as per law, only a third party insurance is mandatory. Insurance companies may also offer something called a comprehensive coverage. So apart from damage or liability to third party, it could be an injury, death, or even damage to goods. The insurance company would also undertake to make good a loss of the insured's own vehicle, his own damage. So there are two components to motor vehicles insurance contract. One is a liability clause, that is third party liability. The other is the own damage clause. An insurance policy having only a liability clause is called either a liability only policy or act only policy. And an insurance contract which has a liability clause as well as an own damage clause is called a package policy or a comprehensive policy. Right? Now, the other section in regards to Motor Vehicles Act is section 149 of the old Act. Now, section 149, suppose a claim is lodged before the Motor Accidents Claims Tribunal. In case of an injury, a petitioner is being injured, he is preferring a claim before the MACT. He has the option to file under two sections, 163A or 166. We'll come to that later. But suppose the vehicle which injured him was being driven by someone who does not possess a valid driving license. Now, why should the insurer pay compensation to someone even though the vehicle driven by his insured was without a valid driving license? So now there are some standard defenses available to the insurance company under section 149, such as driving without driving license, driving without a permit, and violation of a permit. So these are very broad. Or if the vehicle is used for speed test or racing, etc. So these are the only defenses that are available to the insurance company. Now, what if during the course of the claim, the insurer cannot contest on negligence? The insurer cannot contest on quantum. Like for example, if the claim is for the death of a 30-year-old person, right? And he is claiming 1 crore rupees as compensation. The insurance company can only contest on the grounds specified in section 149, the grounds that I just mentioned. Suppose if the accident did not occur because of the negligence of the insured vehicle. Suppose the quantum claimed by the petitioner is too high. The insurer cannot contest on those two grounds. The insurer's only duty is to indemnify the insured. So the award is against the insured and the insurer has to satisfy the judgment. That is all. As per section 149, there are no defenses available. Right now, there is something called section 170 in the Motor Vehicles Act. Like I would like to tell you that impleading an insurer as a party is not mandatory in MACT proceedings. It is enough if the owner of the vehicle is impleaded as a party. And whatever award is passed on the insured has to be satisfied by the insurer. Now, this is where section 170 of the Motor Vehicles Act comes in, or the old Act. Now, what section 170 says is, by way of a petition, the insurance company can step into the shoes of the insured and can take all the defenses available to the insured also. So they can contest on quantum, they can contest on liability also, provided this 170 petition is allowed. Now, as I said earlier, claims may be filed in under two sections. In the old Act, it is under 163A and 166. Now, 163A is a section having a limited scope. It says that the petitioner filing the claim need not prove negligence on the part of the opposite party. It can straight away implead them as parties, and a limited amount of compensation is obtained under 163A, and they need not prove negligence. Whereas in 166, the other section under which the claim is filed, the petitioner has to prove negligence on the part of the vehicle which injured him, but the claim is unlimited. That is, depends on the income of the injured or the deceased. Now let's see how these death claims are adjudicated and how injury claims are adjudicated. Now, as far as death claims are concerned, there is something called a multiplier that is provided in the Motor Vehicles Act. And there's a formula which says that suppose a person aged 32 years or 28 years has passed away. The multiplier as provided in the Act is 18. Now what we have to do is the annual income of the deceased multiplied by the multiplier is the award or the compensation that is due to them. Now from this, an amount of say 1/3 or half or 1/4, depending upon the number of dependents, is reduced, because it is assumed that he would have spent a little bit on himself also. So their legal heirs would be entitled to the remaining sum. So this is how death claims are adjudicated in MSC. And it is very simple. Death claims, as regarding to the death claims, the annual income multiplier less the personal income. That is the compensation to be awarded in a death claim. Now there is something called a future prospects. Now in the Act itself, there is no concept of future prospects. Say for example, a person aged 28 in this case is deceased. So had he been working continuously for the next 20-25 years, his income would obviously increase, right? Each and every year his income would obviously increase, and you also have to account for inflation. So there's a concept called future prospects which was introduced in one of the judgment of the Supreme Court. I'll come to the citations later. What that judgment says is that an amount of 50% of the income has to be added to the income. Now this is called future prospects. So depending upon the age of the deceased, so below 40 years is 50%, 40 to 50 is 25%, and above 50 to 60 is 10%, and so on. So this amount has to be added to the claim amount. This is the concept of future prospects, right? Now let us come to injury claims. So how injury claims are adjudicated. For example, now there are two aspects to an injury claim. First is the aspect of arrival of the disability, the permanent disability, and then how the award is calculated, how the award is computed. For example, an injury occurs to the, say, to the femur bone or the thigh bone of a person. A fracture occurs to the thigh bone of a person. Now, how disability is calculated is an entire session in itself. I do not want to go too deep into that, but let me just give a few words about that. How disability is calculated and how it ought to be calculated. Now, this there are certain guidelines available in each and every country for assessment of disability. And as far as India is concerned, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment has laid down certain guidelines to be followed, and who are the authorities who can issue disability certificates. And it is published in the Gazette also. Say, for example, if it is a case of an amputation. Amputation, as you all know, is removal of a limb. Now, all amputation cases are listed in that Gazette notification. For example, removal of an entire leg is 100%. Removal of the leg above knee would be 75%, and so on and so forth, depending on the organ which is amputated. But what about permanent disability in those cases where there is no amputation? And why there would be permanent disability? Suppose a person in an accident is sustaining a fracture to his thigh bone. The thigh bone is called a femur. Now, how disability is calculated is, if the femur bone is fractured, the movement of that person would be affected at two joints. One is the knee, the other is the hip joint. Now, the knee can make two movements, right? One is the up and down movement, and it can also make a sideways movement. Now, there is something called a device called a goniometer, Goniometer. The doctor who is assessing the disability, he uses this goniometer to check the angle of restriction of movement of that particular joint, right? Say the knee joint has a flexion and extension of 0 to 135 degrees. Now, because of this accident, he is able to move only 50% of the knee, only 50 degrees, right? So the remaining 85% would be the loss of range of motion of the knee. And similarly, coming to the hip joint, the hip can also make three movements. It can make a rotational movement, it can make a lateral movement, and it can make an up and down movement also. So this degree would also be restricted. So based on these two loss of restriction of motion, a figure is arrived at, and there is a very boring formula called A plus B into 90 minus A by 90. And using this formula, a disability is arrived at by the person who is assessing the disability. Now, disability cannot be more than 100% in any case. Now, that is what logic dictates. But we have seen cases where disability of 130% and 150% have been given by doctors. We are stock doctors who visit the MACTs. And there was a landmark judgment by the Madras High Court in Tata AIG versus Prabhu, wherein the Madras High Court has held that the only authority to issue a medical certificate or disability certificate would be a medical board duly constituted by the state government and the person who has treated the injured. So now it is being followed in MACTs. Petitioners are being referred to the regional medical boards for assessment of disability. And as per the guidelines given by the Ministry of Social Health and Welfare, the state governments have the power to constitute authorities who are, you are the authorities to issue disability certificates. And in Tamil Nadu, the state government has appointed, in case of amputations, any doctor working at any government hospital can issue a disability certificate. In case of multiple disabilities not involving amputation, the regional medical board consisting of two experts from that field has to issue the disability certificate. So this is how a disability percentage is being arrived at in injury cases. Now there are two modes of calculation of the compensation. One is in case of amputation. In case of amputation, now there is no chance that the limb is going to grow back. In such case, computation similar to death cases is adopted. But instead, they use the disability percentage in that formula. Annual income into disability percentage. That is the amount of compensation awarded in amputation cases. Now, as far as the other permanent disability cases are concerned, the court follows what is called a conventional method of calculation of compensation. Now, this method is not provided in the Act. Now, it is a creation of the courts. They adopt something called per percentage formula. Like for per percentage of disability, they award 3,000 rupees as far as Chennai MACTs are concerned. So, for example, if because of an injury to the thigh, the person has sustained 25% disability, the amount of compensation under the head disability would be 25% into 3,000 per person, 75,000 rupees. Plus, there are something called other heads like pain and agony, mental agony, loss of income for the treatment period, actual loss of salary, damage to clothing, and other non-liquidated damages also are awarded by the courts. So these are the two broad methods of adjudication of claims before the MSA. Now there is something concept called pay and recover. Now, this is a very important concept, very beneficial to the petitioners. And now, as I said, the insurance company can deny its claim if the vehicle was driven without a driving license, or if the driver was under the influence of alcohol, or if it was driven without a valid permit, or any other reason. The insurance company is entitled to deny their claim. But the courts adopted a proactive approach and said that this is a beneficial legislation. Being a beneficial legislation, the petitioners ought to get the entire benefits of the act. Now, the benefit of the act is intended for the petitioners, so they should get compensation in cases even where the insurance company is at a right to deny their liability. So they adopted something called a concept of pay and recover. In such cases where there is no driving license or no permit, etc., the courts direct that the insurance company must pay the compensation first to the petitioner. For example, a compensation of 3 lakh rupees is arrived at. It is directed that the insurance company must pay this compensation first to the petitioners and then recover from the party who has committed the breach of policy, that is the owner of the vehicle. Now we see that there are many parents who give their vehicles to the children to drive. It is very dangerous practice. We have seen that such persons cause many deaths also. In such cases, now even the parents are booked under 304A, culpable homicide not amounting to murder. In drunk and drive cases, 304 Part 2. People are being booked under 304 Part 2 for culpable homicide not amounting to murder if they are under the influence of alcohol. In such cases also, the insurance company is at liberty to first pay the amount to the petitioner and then recover from the owner of the vehicle. Now, it was held by a catena of decisions that a separate suit need not be filed by the insurance company for such recovery. And they have two options for recovery, either to file an execution proceedings in the same court or to invoke revenue recovery proceedings also. So there are two options available to insurers for pay and recover. So these are the broad points on which the insurance practice is based on. Now there are, of course, many details which we need not go into at this point of time. And there's in appeal, insurance appeals are usually held to filed before the High Court, as we all know. That is under Section 173 of the Act. Now, there's a recent amendment to the Motor Vehicles Act in 2019. Now, this basic framework of cities has not changed, but there are some new concepts which have been introduced in the amendment. First is that whenever an accident occurs and an insurance company comes to know of an accident, they suo motu have to initiate compromise proceedings or settlement proceedings. The insurance company has to appoint an officer who will make an offer to the claimant that, okay, you are injured, okay, I am offering you 2 lakh rupees as compensation. Now, if they are accepting that, a brief notice is prepared and sent to the Motor Accidents Claims Tribunal. That case is settled as compromised. And if the petitioner is not willing for the same, then the trial commences in MSA. So this is a new change that has been introduced into the Motor Vehicles Act. And there's something called a no fault liability in Motor Vehicles Act. In the new act, in the old act also it was under Section 140, but the amount was low. In the new act, like for example, if a claimant says that I need not prove negligence on the part of the vehicle, he can file a petition under the amended act. Hello. Video.
Magesh, you can go ahead, Magesh.
Sir, we can hear you. Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes. ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Magesh, you're audible, Magesh. Can go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Okay. So this scheme of no fault liability is also available to the claimants, where he need not go into much details into the negligence, and he can straight away. Hello. Right. I'm just like taking a look at this amendment. Right. Yeah. Under this amendment, there is also a new section introduced, section 134A, which says that which gives protection to good Samaritans. Now we all know that if a road traffic accident happens, the person just lies on the road like that. There's nobody to help them, and even if somebody helps them, for example, it's on a deserted road. If I see someone who has met with an accident, if I stop my vehicle and if I go to help that person, the police will straight away question me, and they will just say that it is you who have caused the accident. And it was, because of such hassles, people were afraid to help those who met with the road accident, and they are usually busy in taking selfies or recording videos, but there's nobody to help them. So under this new motor vehicle amendment, there's a new section called section 134A, which says that a good Samaritan is a person who in good faith renders emergency medical assistance to the victim or transporting such victim to the hospital. Now it also makes provision for the good Samaritans to protect them from unnecessary trouble or harassment from civil or criminal proceedings. So this is a very landmark introduction in this new amendment. Right. Now, we have talked about the settlement. Yeah. The other amendment is regarding the hit and run cases. We see that there are many cases where there's a hit and run. The person is hit by motor vehicle, and the motor vehicle just flees away. We do not know the number of the vehicle. We do not know the make. And even in that case, even in such cases, so a sum of 2 lakh rupees is fixed in the case of death. And in case of grievous hurt, an amount of 50,000 rupees is prescribed as compensation under hit and run scheme. Right. Now, these are the broad areas which concern the MACTs. Like I've discussed about how death claims are adjudicated, how injury claims, and the concept of pay and recover, and how disability is calculated. So now I would just like to give 2 judgments. One is called the Naveen Kumar judgment. It is called Naveen Kumar judgment by the Supreme Court of India. This is just for a broad, perspective on the sector. See, under this judgment, what was held by the Supreme Court now is that, suppose I am the owner of a motor vehicle. I sell it to, say, Manigandan sir. As per the Central Motor Vehicle rules, it is my duty that once a sale has been concluded, I just need to intimate my concerned RTO and my insurer that the vehicle has been transferred or sold by me to Mr. Manigandan. That is enough as per the Central Motor Vehicle rules. But the Supreme Court differs in its opinion. It says that if I sell my motor vehicle to someone else, it is my duty to make sure that the name transfer has taken place in the registration certificate. So if my advice to you is, if you are selling it happens with all of us, we just sell our motor vehicle. What do? We sell it to either some agent or some person. We just give the signed Form 29 and Form 30. They take our vehicle. Do we even bother to check whether the RC has been transferred in their name? Because the Supreme Court has held that the owner of a motor vehicle, the person in whose name the RC is registered. So what happens in this Naveen Kumar's case is that the vehicle is changing hands 3 or 4 times. Now the 4th or 5th owner is committing an accident. and he was driving without a valid insurance policy. The vehicle was in this original person's name, in X's name, in my name. Supreme Court says that because the RC is in your name, you are liable to pay compensation. So my advice to all your friends and all your clients is that before the sale of a motor vehicle, do not hand over the vehicle before name transfer is effected in the RC. Right? So I differ from the opinion of the Honorable Supreme Court, because as per procedure, it is my duty to only intimate the RTOs and my insurer, but the Supreme Court is having a different view. So we just have to be careful. This is a headache for all of us while sale of a motor vehicle. So please be careful, because we never know who might drive the vehicle in what condition. So once again, please be careful. The other is a Mukund Devangan judgment. It is a fairly recent judgment. Now we all would know that to drive a transport vehicle, there's something called a badge is required. Right? For all transport vehicles, or for all yellow board vehicles, in common knowledge, we knew that a badge was required. Now Supreme Court has clarified in its Mukund Devangan judgment that the word transport vehicle, as used in the Motor Vehicles Act, specifies only heavy vehicles, and that commercial vehicles, which are light motor vehicles, like for example taxis, auto rickshaws, goods vehicles not exceeding 7,000 kilograms. Now the drivers of these vehicles do not require a badge to drive them. So this is a landmark judgment, because all this while police used to book them for having no badge. So now Supreme Court has clarified that the transport vehicle element means a heavy vehicle. To drive a heavy vehicle, you need such an endorsement. So now even for taxis, a simple LMV license is enough and a badge is not required. So these are the broad, I think I would have covered everything in a very broad manner. I didn't go too deep into Motor Vehicles Act. So that is all, and I thank you all for patiently listening to me. And if there are any questions, I am ready to take them now. Yeah, citations, sir. I am having a request for citations. There are a compendium of citations. The most important ones I have collated them. I will send it across. I'll send across the citations to everyone.
Jayanti Shah. Jayanti. Unmute yourself and talk.
Yes, sir. I have a question, Magesh. You spoke really well. It was like really very simple language and explained it well. But I had one question where I had a case where I had like my client had sold the vehicle as a scrap. But so since I am under the impression that it is sold for scrap and I did not go for any name change or anything, and one fine day I get a summons from court saying that you're liable for such and such accident, and that MCOP was booked on me. And when I am now implementing that party in the case, I come to know that company is already liquidated. So I just wanted to know like how to deal with this, or what do you even then do you say that after selling the vehicle I become liable for the accident or whatever?
See, as per both Central Motor Vehicle Rule and Tamil Nadu Motor Vehicle Rules, there are certain authorized scrap dealers who deal with scrapping of motor vehicles. They are registered with the concerned transport departments in each and every circle. So what your client should have done is, when he's selling the vehicle as scrap, just has to fill a form and intimate to the local RTO first that I had sold the vehicle as scrap.
Even for scrap, we need to inform.
Yes. Even for scrap, the local RTO needs to be informed. The registration certificate needs to be cancelled by the concerned RTO. So it is the same effect. I think this judgment will apply. But even as per statutory regulations, your client ought to have intimated the RTO and got the RC cancelled.
I have a certificate from the dealer that he has given it sold as scrap and at the price of so and so per kg, and I have a certificate. Still, but in court, Naveen Kumar judgment, whatever you have quoted,
Yes.
is applying to me. So I just wanted, even when I have a certificate or with this regard also, will this be applicable to me?
Yes, first we need to check whether that company was a registered scrap dealer. So if that person was a registered scrap dealer and the certificate what he has given to you is only a sales certificate, the RC has not been cancelled in my opinion from the required RTO. So if the RC is still in your client's name, then he would be liable. My advice would be to either, if it's a low amount, you can settle the claim, or depending upon the case, I can advise you better now.
Thank you.
Gopi,
Sir.
You can question yourself.
Sir. Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Sir, good evening, sir. My friend purchased one car, sir, through car dealer.
Okay, sir.
Thereafter, he put the signature in the whatever the form required.
Okay, sir.
Then the RCO in the name transfer was affected in the RC book.
Okay, sir.
But he didn't name transfer in the insurance.
Okay, sir.
Meantime, vehicle was accident.
Okay, sir.
Whether we can able to claim any claim, the insurance said at the date of accident, name transfer affected in the RC book.
Yes,
Hence, you are not eligible for
yes,
this
sir.
case. What will be the step for claiming the amount?
Sir, in this regard, the law is very clear, sir. There is something called the concept of insurable interest. So the insurance is in the previous owner's name, and the RC has been changed in your client's name.
Yes.
Right? So now the insurable interest for the vehicle is with your client.
Yes.
But he has not mutated the insurance policy in his name. As per the regulations, sir, within 15 days of transfer of the vehicle, your client needs to have intimated the insurer. He needs to pay an amount of 50 rupees and get the insurance policy transferred in his name. Only then the insurance company can be made liable, sir. So now in this case, it is difficult, sir, because there is no insurable interest for the old client, and there is no relationship of contract between your client and the insurer, right? Why should they be able to in a position to pay? Because there is no contractual liability.
Yes, in case within 15 days, if name transfer affected in the RC book, within 15 days the accident took place, then on the score we can claim the
provided that the name transfer in the insurance policy takes place within 15 days, you can claim.
No, sir. In the gap of the 15 days,
yes, sir. You can claim. You can claim if you get the policy transferred in your name within that 15 days.
15 days.
I understand your question. Suppose if it happens on the second day after buying the vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I understand, sir. You just need to fill up a form with the concerned insurance company and get it transferred to your name.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Natanarajan. Natanarajan. You can unmute yourself and question. Vaishali Gupta. Vaishali.
Yes.
You can question. You can ask your question.
Yes. My question is regarding. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
yeah.
Please.
Yes. My question is regarding the non-payment of fare when the passengers are traveling in a lorry and the accident is caught. Then whether they are entitled to get compensation, interim compensation, which is granted under that.
No, ma'am. There's a concept called non-fare paying passengers or gratuitous passengers.
Correct.
Passengers are not supposed to travel in a goods vehicle.
Correct.
So in that case, even Supreme Court citations are very clear. They are not entitled to compensation, ma'am. They are not entitled to compensation from the insurer, but they can claim compensation from the owner of the vehicle.
Okay, from owner.
Yes.
So in that case, in that litigation, we have to include the vehicle owner as a necessary party to the litigation.
Definitely, ma'am. Vehicle owner as well as insurer. for abundant caution.
Correct. But then if we are not getting the interim compensation from the company, why is it necessary to include the company as a necessary party to the litigation?
Ma'am, because rules may change at any time. The court may even help me. Sometimes the Supreme Court can hold that yes, you pay and then recover from the owner. So the
Oh, I
point
see.
of law can always change. So I just for
Yes.
abundant caution, you can include the insurer.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Natarajan sir. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah. You can ask your question.
Now you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. By way of adding the question raised regarding the scrap,
Yes, sir.
I may say that there is a specific directions in the RTO itself. If you want to dispose of a scrap vehicle, you have to get it declared as scrap.
Yes,
and in the RTO regarding that against that car number or vehicle number, it will be declared as scrap. Once it has been declared as scrap, then you cannot go for rebuilding it and renewing it. If at all you are doing it, then you can't do it. Even that, then in that case, it will be going for fresh registration, because the scrap goes to the vehicle, the RTO, it is go with the registration number and also the engine number and the chassis number.
Yes, sir.
So when you are declaring it as scrap, the engine number, the chassis number are also removed from the RTO office.
Yes, sir.
So
Correct,
unless and until the chassis number, the engine number are removed against that from the book, against that registration number, it will not be treated as a scrap. It will be treated only as a vehicle. With due respect to the explanations given by our good friend, I am also adding to it. That's all.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you,
I
sir.
get your point, sir. Yes. So that is what I said, sir. And once the vehicle has been treated as scrap, the concerned RTO issues a certificate of cancellation of registration also. If that has not been done, the name in whose the person in whose name the RC is still reflected is the owner of the vehicle. Yes, I get it.
Prabhakar?
Yes. Good evening. Yes. Good evening, Mahesh.
Good evening, sir.
My question is, in a hit and run case, against whom we have to initiate claim petition?
Sir?
In a hit and run case, against whom we have to initiate claim petition? You said that in a hit and run case, you can initiate a claim compensation, right? Hello?
Mr. Magesh? Hello?
Yes, hello, Mr. Mahesh?
He'll be coming. Girija, you can ask him to come in your line. What he asked is, in hit and run case, whom has to be added as a party?
Or against whom we have to initiate?
You unmute yourself. 1 second, I'll unmute. Yeah, you can unmute yourself. Yeah, now you
Sorry,
can.
sir. There was some problem with my audio.
Okay.
I get the question, sir.
Okay,
In
okay.
hit and run case, what to do, right? You just need to approach the district collector, sir.
Oh, okay.
There's an entire scheme of something called a solatium fund,
Okay.
and there are some claim inquiry officers maintained under the solatium fund.
Okay.
And in each district, there's a district level committee which is headed by the district collector, sir.
Okay, okay.
So in hit and run cases, it is enough if we contact the collectorate.
Collector, and we have to submit our claim form as it is.
Yes, yes, sir. Along with the criminal case papers also, like FIR and other
Okay.
documents.
Okay, okay. Any fixed amount will be granted or any?
Yes, sir. Now under the amendment, they have raised it, sir.
Okay.
2 lakhs in case of death and 50,000 rupees in case of injury.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
We'll go for only one more question because today we have to hand over before 5 o'clock or maximum 5:05. We'll go for one more question. If those who wish, we can make it. Okay. I think Raghu is there online. So since Raghu is not there, our next meeting falls on next Tuesday. Mr. Vignesh, advocate from DRT, he is going to give lecture on SARFAESI Act. And he is one of the experienced person. Hope you'll all enjoy. And I wish everyone to attend, and you can invite your advocate friends and colleagues to join. And now any other question for the last time, and I'll hand over it to the person who is going to do propose vote of thanks. Shivakumar. Yes, sir. I will unmute.
Hello.
Shivakumar, yes, sir.
Hello. One simple question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, limitation, whether any new decisions by Supreme Court, sir?
Sir, under the amendment, limitation of 6 months has been introduced, sir.
Okay. If it is not before
The latest
6 months,
amendment, because in the previous act there was no concept of limitation because a claim could be filed at any point of time.
Okay,
Under the new amendment, they have restricted it to 6 months.
but it is not implemented in Tamil Nadu.
No, sir, it has not yet been notified, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Prakash.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, Magesh. It was a very wonderful explanation, and you explained the case laws also in a very lucid manner.
Thank you, sir.
My query is, I think you would have come across the latest citation of this judgment of the Supreme Court, wherein they have called upon the insurance company to deposit the amount without deducting the
TDS. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. How do you view this judgment in the current scenario?
Sir, anyhow, see, if what the insurance companies used to do is, if there is no PAN card available with the petitioner, they used to deduct 20% TDS. Sorry, 20% TDS, and if they provided a PAN card, 10% TDS would be deducted by the insurance companies while depositing the compensation amount. So, anyhow, sir, any compensation obtained under an insurance policy is not taxable. So the petitioners, earlier they had to file their returns and get this tax amount refunded to them. But now because of this decision, the entire amount would go directly to them. I think it is very beneficial to them, and it is no loss for the insurers. They have to deposit the entire amount.
No, I agree with the judgment because
Yes,
one way it is not an income for them; it is only a compensation.
Yes, sir.
Compensation cannot be equated with an income.
Yes, sir.
And there is no justification at all in taxing a person for having undergone the trauma of an accident. So this could be a precedent in future cases also.
Yes, sir.
Although how the courts are going to justify their verdict.
No, sir, it is beneficial, sir. Like TDS is a very small issue, sir. Anyhow, the insurance companies use it on a routine basis.
No,
They
if
have
it
to deposit.
is a smaller amount, it's okay. Suppose if it is
So
in
anyhow,
crores.
if they even deduct the TDS, they have to deposit it to the tax department, sir, and then the petitioners would get refund. It was a cumbersome process to obtain the TDS. Now, since this entire amount is deposited into the petitioner's account, at least some burden is being reduced on them, sir. It's beneficial.
Yeah. Thank you.
Finally, I'll allow Vignesh because we have to hand over today at the earlier. So Vignesh, very short, and Kanmani also very short. Kindly ask your question.
So my question is, it is a situation where a vehicle involves in an accident. The driver flees away from the site. The police, upon tracking the address, lands to a particular place where they happen to find that the owner of the vehicle is no more. And in fact, it is seen that on inquiry with the particular person's family, they came to know that they have lodged a complaint with the police stating that the vehicle has, someone have
Stolen
the vehicle. Yeah, they have stolen the vehicle a year before. So now, how will they like the fasten the liability on whom the liability will get fastened, or how the situation will be handled, kind of?
Sir, there is one decision. I think Patna High Court or Allahabad High Court. I need to check with that. But if a stolen vehicle was insured, then the insurance company would be made liable. If suppose the standard defenses are not available to them. But I need to check and get back, sir.
Finally, Kanmani, make it short. Then
Yes, sir.
to Jayanti Shah for vote of thanks.
What are the case can be referred to ombudsman, insurance ombudsman?
Sir, any dispute between the insurance company and the customer can be referred to the ombudsman, sir. For example, if
it is so, okay, if it is failure, whether I can go before tribunal, whether it will attack res judicata.
Sir, ombudsman is only a mediation proceeding, sir. So if it fails, you always have the remedy under common law.
No, you told at the time of giving, at the time of explaining, we need to go before only by way of writ petition against the.
Sir, that is only the insurance company, sir. Since the insurance ombudsman is established by the IRDA, any decision of the ombudsman is binding on the insurance company. They have to satisfy the award. But a customer is not, he has other remedies, like he can go before the consumer forum, can prefer other civil remedies also.
MACT tribunal and other proceedings we can go. It will not attract.
No, sir. MACTs would not be under this because MACT is preferred only by third parties. The insurance ombudsman is preferred by the customers of the insurance policy.
Okay, sir. Fine, sir. Thank you.
Over to Jayanti Shah. Because today, please excuse, we have to hand over before 5:05. Ram is there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Jayanti?
Yes, sir. Good evening, all of you. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this memorable occasion. Let me first thank you all for making this session a resounding success. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Magesh, who has obliged to be our speaker for the day. My heartfelt thanks to all the guests for logging in and sharing their valuable inputs. Last but not least, I thank all my member friends for making this meet a great success. Thank you.
Thank you.